It was a bright and sunny Saturday afternoon, the kind of day that makes you want to step outside and breathe in the fresh air. A woman who worked as a nurse at a small hospital in a coastal town decided it was time for a break. She had been working long hours, taking care of patients day in and day out, and she felt like she needed some time for herself. So she grabbed her water bottle, slipped on her sneakers, and headed to her favorite place, a hiking trail along the cliffs overlooking the ocean. The trail was peaceful, with the sound of waves crashing against the rocks below and the salty breeze brushing against her face. She walked slowly, enjoying every moment, letting her mind wander away from the stress of work. It was exactly what she needed. But just as she was about to sit down on a bench to take in the view, she heard something that made her heart skip a beat: screams. Loud, panicked screams coming from farther down the trail. Without thinking twice, she rushed toward the noise, her feet pounding against the dirt path. When she reached the source of the commotion, her stomach dropped. There, sprawled on jagged rocks near the edge of the cliff, was a man. He wasn't moving. People were standing around, unsure of what to do. Some were whispering nervously, others pointing at the scene in shock. But no one seemed willing or able to step forward and help. That's when the nurse sprang into action. She didn't hesitate. Her training kicked in immediately. She climbed down carefully to where the man lay, her hands trembling but her mind focused. As she got closer, she could see that he was in bad shape. His clothes were torn, blood trickling from a deep cut on his forehead. His breathing was shallow and his body looked twisted in an unnatural way. She quickly checked for signs of life. His pulse was weak, but he was still alive. "Call for help," she shouted to the crowd above. "Get emergency services here now." Then she turned her full attention to the man. Using everything she had learned during her years as a nurse, she assessed his injuries: broken ribs, maybe internal bleeding, and definitely a serious head wound. She knew she had to act fast if she wanted to keep him alive until paramedics arrived. She pressed her hands firmly against the gash on his head, trying to stop the bleeding. The rocks beneath her knees dug into her skin, but she barely noticed. She kept talking to him, even though he wasn't responding. "You're going to be okay," she said softly, more to herself than to him. "Just hold on." Time seemed to slow down. Every second felt like an eternity. She used her scarf to stabilize his neck, tying it tightly around his shoulders to prevent further injury. When she saw a stick nearby, she broke it in half and used it to create makeshift splints for his arms, which looked fractured. The whole time she stayed calm, pushing aside her own fear and focusing on what needed to be done. Finally, after what felt like forever, she heard the distant hum of helicopter blades slicing through the air. Relief washed over her as she saw the rescue team approaching. They rappelled down the cliffside, their movements quick and efficient. Together, they loaded the injured man onto a stretcher and hoisted him up to safety. By the time the helicopter took off, carrying him to the nearest hospital, she was physically and emotionally drained, but also filled with a strange sense of accomplishment. As she climbed back up to the trail, people began to clap. Some thanked her, others simply stared in awe. But she didn't stick around to bask in the attention. Instead, she quietly gathered her things and started walking back home, her mind replaying the events of the past hour. She had saved a life today. That much was certain. What she didn't know yet was how much that decision would change her own life in ways she could never have imagined. Little did she realize that this simple act of kindness would lead to consequences far beyond anything she expected. Because sometimes doing the right thing doesn't always come without a price. And for her, that price was about to become painfully clear. The next morning, the nurse woke up feeling a mix of emotions. On one hand, she was proud of what she had done. Saving someone's life wasn't something that happened every day. On the other hand, she couldn't shake off the exhaustion from the previous day. Her body ached from climbing down those jagged rocks, and her mind was still replaying the chaos in slow motion. But she knew she had responsibilities. She got ready for work, trying to push aside the lingering thoughts about the man on the cliff. When she arrived at the hospital, things felt different. The usual chatter among colleagues seemed quieter, almost tense. As she walked through the hallway toward her station, She noticed people glancing at her but quickly looking away when their eyes met hers. It was strange, like there was some kind of unspoken tension in the air. At first, she brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just overthinking things. But then her supervisor called her into his office. Her heart sank as soon as she stepped inside. His expression said it all before he even opened his mouth. He gestured for her to sit, but she remained standing, sensing that this conversation wouldn't take long. "I'm sure you know why I asked you to come here," he began, his tone cold and clipped. She shook her head, genuinely confused. "You left your shift early yesterday," he continued, leaning back in his chair like he was delivering a verdict rather than having a discussion. "We can't have staff abandoning their posts whenever they feel like it. That's not how this works." She blinked, stunned. "Sir, I didn't abandon my post," she replied, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "There was an emergency. A man fell off the cliff. He needed help immediately. If I hadn't acted, he would have died." Her supervisor didn't flinch. "That may be true," he said, folding his arms across his chest. "But emergencies happen outside these walls all the time. We pay you to handle them here. You made a choice to leave, and now we have to make a choice too." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Effective immediately. Your services are no longer required." For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her mind raced, trying to process what he had just said. Fired? For saving someone's life? It didn't make sense. She tried to explain again, pleading her case, but he cut her off. "This isn't open for debate," he said firmly. "You violated protocol. End of story." Stunned and hurt, she gathered her belongings and left the office. As she walked out of the hospital, she felt a lump in her throat. She had dedicated years of her life to helping people, working tirelessly to provide care to those who needed it most. And now, because of one selfless act, she was being punished. The unfairness of it all weighed heavily on her shoulders. By the time she reached her car, tears were streaming down her face. She sat behind the wheel for a while, gripping it tightly, trying to compose herself. But just as she started the engine, something caught her eye. Parked outside her modest house at the end of the street were 5 black SUVs. They looked out of place in her quiet neighborhood, sleek and intimidating against the backdrop of small homes and neatly trimmed lawns. Standing near the vehicles were several men in suits, their expressions unreadable. Her heart began to race. Who were these people? What did they want? She hesitated for a moment, debating whether to drive away or confront them, but curiosity and a bit of fear got the better of her. Taking a deep breath, she drove toward her house, parking her car in the driveway. As she stepped out, one of the men approached her. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm but authoritative. "We need to speak with you." She crossed her arms instinctively, her defenses rising. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. He flashed a badge, though she didn't recognize the insignia. "My name is Agent Carter. We're here about the incident yesterday. The man you saved." Her stomach churned. This was the last thing she expected after such a grueling day. Still, she nodded and gestured for them to follow her inside. Once they were seated in her living room, Agent Carter wasted no time getting to the point. "What you did yesterday was incredibly brave," he began, his tone softer now. "But I need you to understand something. It wasn't just any man you saved." She frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "The person you pulled off those rocks is Richard Langston III, he explained. Well, let's just say he's someone very important. A billionaire tech mogul. His family has been searching for him since he went missing 2 days ago." Her jaw dropped. She hadn't recognized him during the rescue. His face had been covered in blood, and she'd been too focused on keeping him alive to think about anything else. But now, hearing his name, pieces of the puzzle started falling into place. She remembered seeing news reports about his disappearance, though she hadn't paid much attention at the time. "So why are you here?" she asked cautiously. "And why are you telling me this?" Agent Carter exchanged a glance with one of the other men before answering. "Because saving him has put you in danger," he said bluntly. "There are people who don't want Mr. Langston alive. People who will stop at nothing to silence anyone connected to him, including you." Her blood ran cold. Danger? She hadn't signed up for this. All she had done was try to save a life. The same way she had done countless times before. How could something so noble turn into a nightmare? Agent Carter must have seen the fear in her eyes because he added quickly, "Don't worry. We're here to protect you. But you need to understand the situation fully. This isn't just about you anymore. You've stepped into a world far bigger than you realize." As she listened, her mind reeled. She wanted to believe that none of this was real, that it was some elaborate misunderstanding, but deep down, she knew he was telling the truth. The men in suits, the SUVs, the secrecy, it all pointed to something serious, something dangerous. And yet, despite the fear bubbling inside her, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of determination. If saving that man meant putting herself in harm's way, then so be it. After all, wasn't that what being a nurse was about? Putting others first, no matter the cost? Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would test her courage, challenge her beliefs, and force her to confront truths she never imagined possible. The next few days felt like a whirlwind. The nurse couldn't believe how quickly her life had turned upside down. One moment, she was just an ordinary person trying to do the right thing, and the next, she was at the center of something that seemed straight out of a movie. News about the rescue spread like wildfire. Reporters started showing up outside her house, camping out with cameras and microphones, eager to get a statement from her. Her quiet little neighborhood suddenly became chaotic. At first, she tried to ignore them. She kept her curtains closed and avoided going outside unless absolutely necessary. But it was hard to escape the attention. Strangers began sending her messages online, some thanking her for her bravery, others criticizing her former employer for firing her. It was overwhelming. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and honestly, she didn't want to be. All she had done was what anyone else would have done in her position, help someone in need. Yet here she was, caught in the middle of a media frenzy. To make matters worse, the mysterious agency assigned bodyguards to accompany her everywhere she went. At first, she thought it was overkill. "Do I really need protection?" she asked Agent Carter one morning as two men in suits followed her to the grocery store. He gave her a serious look. "You saved Richard Langston III's life," he reminded her. "There are people who see you as a threat now. We can't take any chances." She sighed, feeling trapped between gratitude and frustration. On one hand, she appreciated their efforts to keep her safe. On the other hand, having strangers shadowing her every move made her feel like she was living in a cage. She missed the simplicity of her old life, the freedom to go for a walk without worrying about who might be watching or what could happen next. Amid all the chaos, there was one unexpected development. Richard Langston himself reached out to thank her. It happened late one evening when she was sitting on her couch scrolling through social media to distract herself from everything. Her phone buzzed, and when she picked it up, she saw a video call request from an unknown number. Hesitant, but curious, she accepted it. The screen lit up, revealing a man lying in a hospital bed. His face was pale and bandages covered parts of his head, but his eyes were sharp and alert. For a second, she didn't recognize him. Then it clicked. This was the man she had saved. "Hi," he said weakly, managing a small smile. "I wanted to say thank you. You saved my life." She blinked, taken aback. I'm glad you're okay," she stammered. "How are you feeling?" "Better than I should be, thanks to you," he replied. His voice was calm, but there was something guarded about him. He glanced off screen briefly, almost nervously, before refocusing on her. "I owe you more than words can express." Before she could respond, he ended the call abruptly, leaving her staring at the blank screen. Something about the interaction left her unsettled. Sure, she was grateful that he had taken the time to thank her personally, but there was an air of mystery surrounding him. Why did he seem so cautious? And why had he cut the conversation short? Over the following days, she found herself thinking about him often. Who exactly was Richard Langston III? She knew he was wealthy, a billionaire tech mogul, but beyond that, details were scarce. The news reports painted him as a genius inventor who preferred to stay out of the public eye. Some even called him a recluse. Yet the more she learned, the more questions she had. What kind of work did he do? Why had he disappeared in the first place? And most importantly, why were people willing to kill him? Agent Carter eventually filled in some of the gaps during one of their meetings. Sitting across from her at her kitchen table, he explained that Langston wasn't just your average billionaire. He was involved in cutting-edge technology, things that could change industries overnight. But innovation always came with risks, and in Langston's case, those risks included rival corporations and shadowy organizations desperate to steal his secrets. They'll stop at nothing to get what they want, Agent Carter warned. And anyone connected to him becomes a target. That includes you. Her stomach churned. She hadn't signed up for this. She had simply acted on instinct, doing what she believed was right. Now, she was being dragged into a world of danger and deception, one she barely understood. Still, she refused to back down. If saving him means putting myself in harm's way, then fine, she said firmly. But I deserve to know the truth. All of it. Carter hesitated, clearly weighing whether to share more information. Finally, he nodded. Fair enough, he said. But understand this. It's not going to be easy. Once you know the full story, there's no turning back. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were documents, photos, and notes detailing the threats against Langston. As she flipped through the pages, her heart sank. It was worse than she imagined. There were surveillance photos of men tailing Langston, intercepted communications hinting at plans to kidnap him, and evidence linking powerful companies to illegal activities aimed at sabotaging his work. This is insane, she whispered, closing the folder. Why hasn't anyone stopped them? We're working on it, Carter replied. But it's complicated. These people have resources, connections, and influence. Taking them down won't be easy. Despite the gravity of the situation, she felt a spark of determination ignite within her. If these people thought they could intimidate her into silence, they were wrong. She had faced challenges before, long hours at the hospital, difficult patients, moments where she doubted herself, and she had always pushed through. This was no different. Except now the stakes were higher. As the days passed, she grew closer to the team assigned to protect her. They weren't just faceless agents anymore. They became allies, people she could trust. Slowly, she began piecing together clues about the conspiracy surrounding Langston. Each revelation brought her closer to understanding the true extent of the danger, but also closer to finding a way to fight back. Through it all, she couldn't shake the image of Langston lying in that hospital bed, his expression wary yet grateful. He had risked everything to pursue his dreams, only to become a pawn in a deadly game. And somehow fate had chosen her to step in and tip the scales. Whether she liked it or not, their lives were intertwined now. The question was, what would she do next? By now, the nurse's life had transformed completely. What started as a simple act of kindness, saving a stranger on a cliff, had spiraled into something far beyond her wildest imagination. Every day brought new challenges, new revelations, and new fears. But amidst the chaos, she found herself growing in ways she never expected. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was part investigator, part protector, and entirely determined to uncover the truth. The media attention didn't let up. If anything, it grew more intense. News outlets couldn't get enough of her story, the everyday hero who risked everything to save a billionaire's life. Her face appeared on TV screens, newspapers, and social media feeds everywhere. People called her brave, selfless, and inspiring. Some even sent gifts to her house, flowers, letters, baked goods. At first, she appreciated the support, but soon it became overwhelming. Strangers showed up at her door asking for autographs or photos. Reporters tried to bribe her neighbors for information about her daily routine. It felt like she couldn't breathe without someone watching. Through it all, she kept reminding herself why she did what she did. Saving that man wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about doing the right thing. But the constant scrutiny made her question whether she'd ever have a normal life again. Even worse, the bodyguard stationed outside her home served as a constant reminder that danger lurked. Around every corner, the men in suits weren't there to protect her from paparazzi. They were there because someone wanted her dead. Despite the fear gnawing at her insides, she refused to let it control her. Instead, she threw herself into helping Agent Carter and his team piece together the puzzle surrounding Richard Langston III. They worked late into the night, poring over documents, analyzing surveillance footage, and connecting dots that seemed impossible to link. Each clue they uncovered painted a clearer picture of the conspiracy, but also deepened the mystery. One evening, while sitting at her kitchen table with stacks of papers spread out before her, she stumbled upon something shocking. A document buried deep within the files mentioned St. Mary's Hospital, the very place where she used to work. At first, she thought it was a coincidence. Maybe one of the rival corporations involved in targeting Langston had ties to someone who worked there. But as she read further, her blood ran cold. The hospital itself was implicated, not directly, but through shady dealings with one of the companies suspected of orchestrating the attacks on Langston. Her mind raced. Was this why she had been fired so abruptly? Had her bosses known something they weren't supposed to? Or worse, were they somehow complicit in the plot against Langston? The thought made her sick to her stomach. She had trusted those people, poured years of her life into serving patients under their roof. Now she wondered if any of it had been real, or if she had unknowingly been part of something sinister. She shared her discovery with Agent Carter immediately. He listened intently, his expression darkening as she explained her findings. "This changes things," he said finally. "If the hospital is involved, we need to tread carefully. These people are dangerous." "But how could I not know?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I worked there for years. How could I miss something like this?" "It's not your fault," he assured her. "These kinds of operations are designed to stay hidden. You were just doing your job." His words offered little comfort. Still, she resolved to keep digging. The more she learned, the angrier she became, not just at the vast web of corruption unraveling before her eyes, but at the way ordinary people like her were caught in the crossfire. She hadn't asked for any of this, yet here she was, fighting for survival while trying to expose the truth. As the days turned into weeks, she began forming an unexpected bond with Richard Langston himself. Though they only spoke occasionally via video calls, their conversations revealed glimpses of the man behind the headlines. He wasn't the aloof genius everyone described. He was human, flawed, and deeply lonely. He admitted that his relentless pursuit of innovation had cost him relationships, friendships, and peace of mind. "I thought I could change the world," he told her during one call. "Instead, I created enemies." "You're still alive," she reminded him gently. "That means you can still try." Her words seemed to resonate with him. Over time, their interactions grew warmer, less formal. He started sharing details about his work, not just the technical aspects, but the passion that drove him. Hearing him talk about his inventions reignited a spark in her too. For the first time since losing her job, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Maybe she couldn't return to nursing right away, but she could use her skills to help others in a different way. Meanwhile, the agency tightened security around her. 5 black SUVs remained parked outside her house day and night, their presence both comforting and suffocating. She knew they were there to protect her, but sometimes she longed for the freedom to step outside without feeling like a target. Simple pleasures, a walk along the beach, a visit to the local cafe, felt like distant memories. Yet, despite the restrictions, she found moments of joy. The agents assigned to guard her gradually opened up, sharing stories about their own lives and families. One of them, a young man named Alex, often joked about how his wife would kill him if he missed another family dinner. Another, an older woman named Lisa, loved gardening and gave her tips on growing herbs indoors. Slowly, they became more than just protectors. They became friends. Through it all, she held on to hope. Hope that justice would prevail. Hope that, The people responsible for threatening Langston's life would be held accountable, and hoped that someday she could reclaim a sense of normalcy. But deep down, she knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Uncovering the truth meant confronting powerful forces that wouldn't hesitate to silence anyone standing in their way. And so, as she sat by her window one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she prepared herself for whatever came next. The journey had been hard, painful even, but it had also taught her something valuable. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to move forward despite it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them, head on. After all, she had already proven that she was capable of extraordinary things. The deeper she dug into the conspiracy, the more dangerous things became. Every new piece of information uncovered felt like pulling on a thread that unraveled an entire web of lies, corruption, and greed. The nurse knew she was stepping into territory far beyond anything she'd ever imagined, but she couldn't turn back now. Too much was at stake, not just her own safety, but the lives of countless others who could be affected by the sinister forces targeting Richard Langston III. Agent Carter had warned her repeatedly about the risks. "These people don't play fair," he said during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "They'll stop at nothing to protect their interests. If they find out you're helping us, they won't hesitate to silence you." His words sent chills down her spine, but instead of scaring her off, they only fueled her determination. She had seen too much to walk away now. This wasn't just about saving one man. It was about exposing a system built on exploitation and deceit. One breakthrough came when she discovered a hidden ledger buried in the files provided by the agency. It listed transactions between St. Mary's Hospital and several shadowy organizations linked to Langston's rivals. The amounts were staggering. Millions of dollars funneled through shell companies under the guise of research grants and consulting fees. At first glance, it looked legitimate, but upon closer inspection, the details didn't add up. Equipment orders were inflated, salaries paid to non-existent employees, and contracts signed without proper oversight. Her old hospital wasn't just complicit, it was actively aiding those trying to destroy Langston. She confronted Agent Carter with her findings. "This proves it," she said, slamming the ledger onto the table. "My hospital is involved. They knew exactly what they were doing." Carter's expression hardened as he flipped through the pages. "You're right," he admitted. "But we need concrete evidence connecting them to the attacks on Langston. Documents like this are a start, but we need something undeniable, something that will hold up in court." Determined to gather that proof, she decided to take matters into her own hands. With the help of Alex and Lisa, two of the agents guarding her, she devised a plan to sneak into the hospital after hours. It was risky, but she knew the risk was worth it. She still had access codes to certain areas from her time working there, and though they might have been deactivated, it was worth a shot. Armed with flashlights and nerves of steel, the trio slipped inside through a side entrance late one night. Familiar hallways felt eerie in the darkness. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the faint smell of antiseptic brought back memories of her days as a nurse. But tonight, everything felt different. Instead of rushing to care for patients, she was searching for answers. Room by room, they combed through offices, filing cabinets, and storage rooms, looking for anything that could tie the hospital directly to the conspiracy. Finally, in the basement archives, a place rarely visited by staff, they struck gold. Hidden behind stacks of old medical records was a locked cabinet labeled "Confidential." Using a paperclip and sheer persistence, they managed to pick the lock. Inside were folders filled with incriminating documents, emails discussing illegal deals, invoices detailing payouts to mercenaries, and even blueprints of locations where attempts on Langston's life had been planned. "This is it," she whispered, her hands trembling as she held up one of the folders. "This is what we've been looking for." Back at her house, the team celebrated quietly. For the first time since this nightmare began, she felt a glimmer of hope. They finally had enough evidence to expose the truth, not just about the hospital, but about everyone involved in the plot against Langston. But as Agent Carter reminded her, the fight wasn't over yet. We can't just hand this over to anyone, he cautioned. If word gets out prematurely, they'll cover their tracks faster than we can blink. We need to move carefully. As they prepared to release the information to trusted authorities, she reached out to Langston again. Their calls had become a lifeline for both of them, a way to share updates and offer support during the darkest moments. When his face appeared on her screen, she noticed he looked stronger, more alert than before. His recovery was progressing well, but there was still a heaviness in his eyes, a lingering fear of what might come next. I found something big, she told him, holding up one of the documents. Something that connects your enemies to my old hospital. Once we make this public, it's going to blow everything wide open. For a moment, Langston didn't say anything. Then slowly, a smile spread across his face. You've done more for me than anyone else ever has, he said softly. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, she replied. Just promise me you'll keep fighting. For yourself, for your work, and for everyone who believes in what you're doing. Their conversation ended with a renewed sense of purpose. Together they agreed on a timeline for releasing the evidence, ensuring it would reach the right people at the right time. Meanwhile, the nurse continued working closely with the agency to ensure her safety and the safety of everyone helping her. The 5 black SUVs remained parked outside her house, a constant reminder of the danger lurking nearby. Yet despite the looming threat, she refused to let fear dictate her actions. Public opinion began shifting as snippets of the investigation leaked to the media. People were outraged to learn that a respected institution like St. Mary's Hospital had ties to such corrupt practices. Protesters gathered outside its doors, demanding accountability. Former employees came forward with stories of unethical behavior and pressure to comply with questionable directives. The hospital's reputation crumbled almost overnight. Through it all, the nurse stayed focused on the end goal, justice. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she wasn't alone. Between Langston, the agency, and the growing number of allies joining their cause, she felt a sense of solidarity she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since losing her job, she realized she had found a new purpose, one rooted in courage, resilience, and a fierce desire to make the world a better place. And as dawn broke over the horizon, casting golden light across her small town, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The journey had been long and painful, but it had also taught her something invaluable. Sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the greatest victories. Whatever happened next, she was ready. The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and the nurse could feel the tension in the air. It was as if the entire world had been holding its breath, waiting for the storm to break. She knew that once the evidence was made public, there would be no turning back. Lives would change, some for the better, others forever ruined. But justice would finally have a chance to prevail. On the day they released the documents, the nurse stood alongside Agent Carter and his team in a secure room filled with computer screens and phones constantly ringing. Reporters from major news outlets had been tipped off about the story, and within minutes the revelations began spreading like wildfire. Headlines screamed about corruption at St. Mary's Hospital, naming names and exposing connections to powerful corporations and shadowy organizations tied to attacks on Richard Langston III. The sheer scale of the conspiracy shocked even those who thought they'd seen it all. As the news broke, chaos erupted. Protesters flooded the streets outside the hospital, chanting slogans and holding signs demanding accountability. Social media lit up with hashtags calling for justice. Law enforcement agencies launched investigations, raiding offices and seizing assets linked to the scandal. Prominent figures implicated in the scheme scrambled to distance themselves, issuing denials and apologies that rang hollow to anyone paying attention. For the first time in years, the people behind the curtain were being forced into the light, and they didn't like it one bit. Back at her house, the nurse watched the unfolding drama with mixed emotions. On one hand, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that the truth was finally coming out. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the weight of everything she'd been through. Sleepless nights, constant fear, and the loss of her old life weighed heavily on her. But amidst the exhaustion, there was also pride. She had faced unimaginable challenges and come out stronger on the other side. That evening, Richard Langston called her again. His voice sounded lighter, freer than before. "It's over," he said simply. "Because of you, we've taken down the people trying to destroy me. I can't thank you enough." She smiled, though he couldn't see it. "You don't owe me anything," she replied. "I just did what I thought was right." "You did more than that," he insisted. "You risked everything, for someone you didn't even know. Not many people would do that." Their conversation turned reflective, each sharing how much the experience had changed them. Langston admitted that he'd spent so long chasing success that he'd forgotten why he started inventing in the first place. To help people. Seeing the nurse's unwavering dedication to doing good no matter the cost inspired him to reevaluate his priorities. He vowed to use his resources not just to innovate but to uplift communities and make a real difference. For her part, the nurse realized that saving lives wasn't limited to hospitals or clinics. Sometimes it meant standing up against injustice, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Though she missed nursing deeply, she found solace in knowing that her actions had saved countless others, not just Langston, but everyone affected by the corrupt system she helped dismantle. A few days later, Langston reached out with an offer she hadn't expected. "I want to give you a job," he said. "Not because I feel obligated, but because I believe in what you stand for. My company is building a state-of-the-art research facility focused on healthcare innovation. We need someone like you, someone who understands compassion and courage, to lead our outreach programs." At first she hesitated. Could she really step into such a high-profile role? Was she ready to leave behind the only career she'd ever known? But as she thought about it, she realized this might be exactly what she needed. A fresh start, a chance to continue helping people in a new way. After thanking him, she accepted the offer, knowing it was an opportunity too meaningful to pass up. With the immediate danger behind her, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. The 5 black SUVs disappeared from her driveway, replaced by the quiet hum of everyday routines. The reporters stopped showing up unannounced, and her neighbors greeted her warmly again, proud of what she'd accomplished. Even the hospital underwent massive reforms, with new leadership vowing to restore trust and integrity. But the nurse didn't forget the lessons she'd learned. Every morning as she prepared for work at Langston's facility, she reminded herself of the power of resilience and the importance of staying true to her values. Her journey had taught her that bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about moving forward despite fear. And sometimes, doing the right thing means stepping into the unknown, even when it feels impossible. One evening, as she walked along the same cliff where it all began, she paused to take in the view. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, waves crashing rhythmically against the rocks below. It was peaceful, almost serene, a stark contrast to the turmoil she'd endured. As she stood there, she reflected on how one decision had set off a chain reaction that changed not only her life, but countless others. Though the scars of the past remained, they served as reminders of her strength. She had faced darkness head-on and emerged victorious, not because she sought glory, but because she believed in doing what was right. And as she gazed at the horizon, bathed in the golden glow of sunset, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for second chances, for unexpected allies, and for the knowledge that even in the face of overwhelming odds, ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things. Her journey wasn't perfect, and neither was she. But she had proven something invaluable, that kindness, courage, and determination could light the way through even the darkest storms. And as she turned to leave the cliffside, she carried that truth with her, ready to face whatever came next. Because sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the brightest futures.